One of the most persistent lies about the Wild West is that it was a lawless territory ruled by anarchy. We have all seen the movies, outlaws roaming wild, towns without sheriffs, and justice done at the end of a rifle. Was it truly like that, though? Strict laws and rules were reality for many Wild West communities. Indeed, there were pockets of anarchy, particularly in recently founded colonies, but most towns built local governments rather fast. Common figures were sheriffs, marshals, and judges who put great effort to preserve discipline. Actually, some of the most well-known lawmen, such as Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp, were actual persons who greatly helped to maintain peace. Now, that's not to argue crime wasn't present. There were outlaws like Jesse James and Billy the Kid, but their adventures were sometimes overblown. The reality is that most Wild West residents were simply trying to survive, not daily avoiding gunshots. Gunfights were regular events. The gunfight is another venerable Wild West cliché. You know the scene. Two men facing each other at high noon, hands hanging over their holsters, poised for drawing. But how often did these dramatic performances really take place? Unlike common opinion, gunfights were really rare. Most individuals carried weapons for protection, particularly in far-off places where robbers or animals might endanger one. Still, the concept of quick-draw duels right in the midst of the street is essentially fiction. Actually, several communities have tight gun control rules. For instance, guests of Dodge Municipal, Kansas, were expected to check their weapons at the municipal borders. And when gunfights did take place, they were frequently sloppy, chaotic events rather than the orderly, dramatic presentations seen in movies. For example, the well-known gunfight at the O Corral lasted only roughly 30 seconds and more resembled a brawl than a duel. Cowboys were lone heroes. Perhaps the most famous individuals of the Wild West are cowboy ones. We see them as tough, self-reliant loners riding over the wide range. But cowboy life was really extremely different. Most of the cowboy were ranch hands shepherding livestock over long, demanding hours. It was a difficult work requiring cooperation instead of lone heroism. Most cowboys had group employment and were far from luxurious lives. They encountered difficult terrain, severe weather, and ongoing threat of stampedes or rustlers. And let's not forget, cowboy hailed from all backgrounds. Many were African Americans, Native Americans, or Mexicans vaqueros. Hollywood created the cowboy as a white, lone hero, a white fantasy. A man's world, the Wild West. When we consider the Wild West, we usually see a world run under men's control. But the frontier was shaped in great part by women. Women in the Wild West were hardly docile. They held property, controlled companies, and occasionally fought for their rights. Leaders like Calamity Jane and Annie Oakley developed legends in their own right. Beyond these well-known figures, though, many average women collaborated with men to create communities and thrive in a hostile environment. Women generally served as nurses or teachers, therefore playing a major part in healthcare and education. Thus, even if the Wild West was hard, it was not only the world of men. The villagers were Native Americans. The way Native Americans are portrayed as villains in the Wild West is among the most destructive falsehoods about that era. Though it's far from the reality, this reputation has been reinforced in innumerable westerns. Native Americans were the first occupants of the territory, their way of life closely entwined with the surroundings. Conflicts did develop when colonists traveled westward, but they usually sprang from broken treaties, land disputes, and cultural misinterpretation. Like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, many Native American leaders battled to preserve their people and way of life. It's crucial to keep in mind that the Wild West constituted just as much their narrative as it did the colonists. Understanding this era in history depends on appreciating their efforts and hardships. The short, dramatic era that was the Wild West. Let's now consider the chronology. Many view the Wild West as a fleeting, explosive period. Actually, though, it covered several decades and changed with time. The Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark Expedition launched the early 1800s Wild West. It persisted across the Civil War, the Gold Rush, and railroad development. The Wild West, as we know, it was vanishing and the border was fading by late 1800s. So, even if it would seem like a brief, dramatic chapter in history, the Wild West was really a complex and changing period that shaped the country. American history's intriguing Wild West is full of fiction as well as fact. Separating the legends from the facts helps us to better grasp the people and events influencing this legendary age. I appreciate you traveling with me over the Wild West. Should you find great enjoyment in this video, Make sure to like, subscribe, and mark that notification bell for further historical deep dives. Continue looking back until next time.